Evolution is the reason that we're all here today, and the reason that Will Wright made that broken game about making cursed creatures that only a mother could love. And some say evolution is still progressing right now.
They've imitated human beings doing it, and now they do it, but they do it independently. They're not trained orangutans, they're wild orangutans. Look at that. There's a wild orangutan.
Okay, that's impressive. That's impressive.
And there has been so many games over the years that tried to take the concept of evolution into gaming. Pokemon basically created a self-perpetual money-generating machine with the concept. And Digimon made cute cats turn into fridges with guns attached. One of my favourite games that dives into this subject is Tokyo Jungle, which takes the concept into the post-apocalypse. And asks the question, can these little rat dogs that are a affront to God survive without us? And the answer is no. No, they can't. But today's subject, Cubivore, takes that concept in a wholly unique direction that's so quirky and strange it could only come out of the mind of a Japanese person. I mean, they once locked a guy in a room for a year to see if he could live off things he won in sweepstake contests. And they did whatever the hell Takeshi's Castle was. And just looking at the game's art style, you can instantly tell that this is going to be pure sharp-dressed goblin fodder. Any game where I can be poncy and philosophize on the meaning of gaming or art in general is going to be a winner. But as with many of the games I cover on this channel, this game's story starts with its creator, Gento Matsumoto. Gento Matsumoto was born in Tokyo in 1961, and unlike a lot of the game makers I cover on this channel, there really isn't that much information about him on the internet. However, there's enough tidbits floating about, and I found out a couple of interesting things about Gento that are definitely worth bringing up. The guy seems like a bit of a character, shall we say. Like someone else I've covered on this channel before, Osamu Sato, creator of LSD Dream Emulator, Gento seemed to have been one of the many Japanese creatives who got interested in digital art and design in the 80s and 90s. Because when you look at some of the art he's done over the years, it's very much in line with that neo-future computer-made art that was all the rage around the Y2K era. He went to school for art and design, graduating in 1983, and from what I can find, he did a lot of design work for advertising and video games from graduation. He even helped out on designs for the great Sega game Pulseman, which I'm a big fan of. From what I can gather, around 1984 he started working with Nintendo, but details about what he actually did there are pretty scant. It's said in multiple places that he was Shigeru Miyamoto's right-hand man until seemingly 1996. And this is given real backing by the fact that Gento's later company was bought under the Nintendo umbrella by Miyamoto personally to add some more support for the N64 from third parties. He set up Seru Brunei in 1990 mainly as a company to help him out with his art in various forms and to work on video games and advertising. This company was pivotal in pushing forward what were called floppy magazines in the early 90s, which were essentially interactive pieces of art that came on floppy disks. Yes, I know, floppy, very funny. They actually won a lot of awards for their work doing this kind of stuff and later moved on to do the same kind of thing with CD-ROMs. And one of their most famous works in this style was the interactive CD-ROM pop-up computer, which was basically a digital art book that, much like a real pop-up book, came to life when you interacted with it. And honestly, this was incredibly hard to find footage of, but luckily M Foolery had a video of her playing it on her stream, and she was nice enough to send me some clean footage of the CD-ROM. Check out her Twitch channel, link below, if you like strange old PC oddities. It starts out innocuously enough, telling you a story with a nice 3D animation of a beach in the background, but soon dissolves into madness. Like this band playing weird noise rock, or a monkey in a spinning teacup playing guitar. Or little interactive parts like here where you can move a boat around on the waves or throw UFOs as a monkey in a giant stadium catches it. My personal favourite is this woman with an axe that, if you click inappropriately, shall we say, teaches you about consent by throwing an axe into your skull. I mean, that's one way of teaching kids you shouldn't do that, I suppose. I mean, Japan does have that rule that all phone cameras have to make a noise when taking pictures for a reason. Or how about this creepy serial killer monkey showing us things he's going to torture us with?
Why do you have so many weapons in your kitchen? It's just like, here's my knife, here's my other knife.
This CD is basically like Adult Swim meets Microsoft and Carter, and it's so fascinating it could honestly be its own video, but we've got to move on. Because after this, they actually released their first video game, Jungle Park, in 1996. And it's actually kind of like they took the concept of that CD-ROM and put it into a video game setting. And it's sort of a walking simulator because you basically just move your monkey character around this island with your mouse and stuff happens. Be it animations or little mini games, but apparently there's an overarching story going on behind all this randomness. And it actually shows off the art style Cubivore itself would have. After seeing this game, Nintendo decided to bring in Serai Brunei to develop games for the ill-fated 64DD add-on for the N64. And much like Doshin the Giant, that's where Cubivore started out its life, and there's only really shaky Space World 2000 footage of this early version of the game. But later on, during the Gamecube era, Brunei teamed up with Intelligent Systems to port that game over to the Gamecube, and that's how we got Cubivore. But before we talk about the game itself, I just want to mention that Gento Matsumoto, after Brunei got dissolved in 2003, ended up going to jail for 6 months for, I quote, committing every crime that a driver could apart from running someone over. I mean, what can I say other than based? And for some reason he released a book about this experience. And he even went as far to say that doing 6 months in prison was good for him and more people, especially creatives, should try this. Okay, next time I fall into an alcoholic, junk food infused, depressive football manager hole that stops me from making videos for 3 months, I'll just do a little stint in prison.
I hate myself right now, but not enough to stop.
Cubivore starts with one of this game's weird beasties roaring at us with a Gamecube logo for a head. When you think about it, it's like fate that the 64DD failed and this game got to come out on a console that looks like the art style it's going for. Kinda like how Gavrilo Princip, the guy who shot Franz Ferdinand and started World War I, was only able to do so because he went to buy a sandwich. I could go off on a tangent here, but look it up, it's real and it'll make you believe in fate. But yeah, after the beast lumbers into frame, it wanders off to take a massive 1994 Green Day album, Dookie, in the centre of the frame. And then some weird little flesh homunculi start eating said poop. Well, you can instantly tell this game was made in Japan. We then get to name ourselves and we see that we will be playing as this pig tadpole abomination. And we open to an intro cutscene that has that unsettling creature narrating the air quotes story to Cubivore. Our protagonist is actually very vocal throughout this game via text, and he kind of won me over with his strange, quirky, autistic sense of humour. Reminded me of myself. Seems like the kind of guy you could have a good game of Warhammer with. But basically this world is filled with these creatures that look like if your dog impregnated some unbuilt IKEA furniture and then your 5-year-old had a go at them with some crayons. And these creatures are being oppressed by other creatures that don't have colour. This is meant to be white people, isn't it? These colourless ones are being led by their very own Grand Wizard, the Killer Cubivore, and it's our job to return colour to this land and become the new Killer Cubivore. And to do this, we have to evolve our little piggy into a killing machine and defeat all of his generals like a QB version of Kill Bill. Then, we are born. I still can't get over how cursed this thing is.
Look at him and tell me there's a god!
And he is let loose upon this world to sow chaos and destruction. Instantly, you can really tell that this is a port of a 64DD game, because apart from the main characters, everything looks like it could have been ripped out of The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. Even the camera feels like it was ripped out of a game from that era because it's awful and unwieldy. It only moves in stages rather than a free-flowing camera, and it gets stuck on terrain when you're near walls, which makes combat and getting about a pain in the arse. However, everything in this game is just so strange and unique that all this kind of stuff just gives it a weird charm and atmosphere. It actually proper reminds me of another game I covered not too long ago on this channel, Tale of the Sun, which had a very similar premise except it was about cavemen rather than straight up animals. It feels like Gento saw that game and wanted to make his own version of it where there was actually more of a set goal than a game about nothing. Whereas Tale of the Sun was this open world sort of game where you just potted about, Cubivore works in a classic level by level setup, with you usually having to beat a boss or get to some set goal before you can move on in your quest of evolution. And again, like Tale of the Sun, the gameplay pretty much boils down to run around and eat everything you see. The combat of this game pretty much just consists of locking onto an enemy with R and then hitting A to bite them until they're dead. Early on this is painful though because your character is so slow and useless. But I guess that's kind of the point, because you know, evolution, you get better, supposedly. This game is a horrible experience anytime you have to deal with more than 2 enemies though, because you tend to get dogpiled without being able to do anything about it. The amount of times I got annoyed and started shouting, "Lock onto the character! The one in front of you!" You can block, but that doesn't really do anything when you're getting swarmed like the only girl in a Warhammer store. However, once your character levels up a bit, the combat does get a bit less frustrating and slow. Make no bones about it though, this game is basically an RPG disguised in weird obtuse terms that it doesn't adequately explain to you. It almost feels like this game is a commentary on RPGs, using a very on-the-nose evolution analogy to get its point across. Evolution is adapting and gaining more power to further the proliferation of your species, and RPGs are pretty much the same thing. It's like the reason you enjoy this stuff so much as a human is because progression and resource acquisition is what you're wired for from birth. I like the way they go about it here though, because you can see the evidence of your monster getting more powerful on his body. He'll gain big horns, scars, and a hump for some reason.
absolutely no way I'm getting through that. Completely solid.
And these changes are related to a few stats that you can increase by collecting special power-ups in the game world or by using training machines dotted around the levels. And these essentially increase your attack, defense, eating, and health, which you can max out later in the game. Your health bar is your stomach meter, which you can restore by eating the food strewn around and the other animals. And you die if you get knocked over and munched on when you're at 0 health, but it's pretty hard to die in this game. Because usually you'll be able to mash out of their bite, but it still makes you panic like your neighbours are having a conversation in the hallway when you want to leave for work. It gives this nice push and pull to the gameplay, even if how clunky it is can get me very angry at times. And there's even a day and night cycle in this game that can happen halfway through a battle and heal up the boss you were fighting, which is just great. I'm not salty at all. I love the fact that every time you go to sleep we get a poem from our erstwhile hero. Didn't realise we were dealing with Miyamoto Musashi over here. But most of this stuff is pretty standard. The thing that makes this game interesting is the mutation mechanic. So all the colours they were going on about earlier are actually a big part of the gameplay of Cubivore. Because whenever you get an enemy's health down to 0 and attack it again, you rip off colours from them and then consume them to change your own character. And every time you do it, it will result in a different form with different stats and different ways of attacking and moving. This is the most addictive part of the game because it makes you just want to go around and try out all the different combinations to see what you can get. Your inbred IKEA furniture animal starts off with 1 limb you can mutate, which only means 1 colour, but then through the course of the game it gets up to 6. So it will lead you hunting around the map looking for the right coloured animal you need to get the form you want. And the game even has this handy Cubivore Pokédex that lists out all the forms you can get in the game for each stage of evolution. But how do you evolve extra limbs, I hear you ask? Well, that's one of the funniest things in this game. You bang. You bang like you were Rasputin with his groupie hose back in the 1900s. All I'm saying is, bros, if a guy that looks like this can get harem, there's hope for you. I mean, even our mutant pig tadpole thing is getting some. White pill for the day. You're welcome. As you go around the levels, you'll collect these heart containers and heart bugs to give you more love points that make more females want to let you touch their calcium cannons. You enter these doors that are called mating grounds, and as they always say when they enter the bedroom in an MTV Cribs episode, this is where the magic happens. Here the game lets you know how many females want to get with you, and then it very candidly asks you,
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Then once you've done the deed, you now have an extra limb, and every time you do this your character unsurprisingly gets better to control. And I went from being very annoyed by this game to actually really enjoying myself with the more evolutions my character went through. The annoyance was mainly for all the early boss battles in the lower forms, because even if you get a good form for it, you're going to have a bad time. And this is because the bosses are some of the cheapest ones I've ever seen in a video game. Because they'll always be backed up by an entourage of beasts, and it successfully made me feel how that girl must have felt on the day she shot that scene from the famous meme. And this is because not only at the lower forms are you weaker, so it takes an absolute age to actually kill the bosses, you'll be fighting the lock-on and the camera as you're trying to fight off all your attackers. And it turns into this monotonous game of hit and run until you can slowly pick off all the enemy forces. A lot of this is due to you only being able to lock on when stationary though, and it gets alleviated as you gain more quality of life features throughout the game. You might be saying, so that solves your problem, so why are you still moaning? Well, that would all be well and good if it didn't make you restart from scratch multiple times in this game. It's like in a game where they let you start with all the power-ups and goodies and then strip it away from you. I'd get to a point with a 5 limmer where I'm really enjoying the intricacies of combat and annihilating things that gave me trouble earlier on, only to have the rug pulled out from under me and have to start over again as a 1 limmer that's about as much use as a condom machine in the Vatican. But every time you restart you change animals, so you start off as Pigman and then you become a bear and finally finish off as a bird. It honestly feels like a step back to finish up as a bird for whatever reason. However, I was purposely burying the lead a little bit here because the reason you have to restart is one of the funniest bits of this game. And that's including the fact that there's a dedicated poo button. This is the weirdest game I've ever covered, and that's saying something because I've covered some weird ass games. But I digress because, you know, that's kind of my thing. In Cubivore, your main goal is to defeat the killer Cubivore, but in a way there's a second goal that your character is striving towards the whole game. He wants to mate with a giant woman. This game right here was ahead of the curve by decades. You get all these people saying that they want a big goth lady from Resident Evil to crush them in her thighs. But this big boy from this silly evolution game, he was the original Amazon chaser, wishing for a sweet death by Snoo Snoo, followed by feasting in the halls of Valhalla as a champion among men.
The big woman's still here?
Conquering this big lady is actually the only way you can gain access to the endgame of Cubivore. And she is as picky as a 5-foot fat woman on Hinge. Oh, I see you defeated the second most powerful beast in the land, but you're not a 6'8" millionaire CEO with a Lamborghini. Susan, you're a 4'10" Tesco shelf stacker. I think your standards might be a little bit too high. She'll only accept you if you've mutated your Cubivore enough throughout the course of the game, otherwise she will reject you and devour you, then poo you out like all the other times. This is my experience with women in the real life. And you know what that means? If you haven't mutated your Cubivore a grand total of 100 times, you have to go all the way back to the beginning and do the game over again until you have 100. And as you can imagine, the thought of going through all of this again was not the most pleasing concept to me. Don't get me wrong, I was enjoying my time with this game, even though there was some bits of frustration mixed in. But the thought of having to use the early forms of each animal was about as appealing to me as listening to Modern Gent. And you know, the fact that I'm trying to make a video on this game with my limited free time that I have. This little thing right here put this video back a good 3 days. But the funny thing is, after I finished swearing, which was a very long time later, I actually kind of enjoyed going back through the game. You get a sort of game plus mode where you can take on the game in whatever order you want, and there's new bonus stages to help you out with your goal. And it doesn't hurt that you keep all your stat boosts from the first playthrough, so you can feel like a shiny golden god. The second sort of half playthrough made me really start to understand and appreciate all the systems in this game and what was actually going on. Because in my first playthrough I just kind of went through eating whatever I came across with no regard for what I was doing. But with this playthrough I had to actually carefully look at the Cubivore Pokédex and figure out what monsters I needed to collect from each form. And it honestly did give me that list filling buzz that you get from games like Pokemon. It's such a satisfying mechanic in any game. I didn't really properly explain how the mutation system works earlier, so let's go into a bit more depth now. When you're a one-limbed beast, it's pretty easy because whatever you eat will transform you into that form. But with every limb it gets more and more complicated, with weak to strong versions of the colours you collect and even forms that require mixtures to mutate. So filling out the mutation Pokédex required a lot of running around levels and seeing what forms you can make with what resources are on the level. Which is funnily enough what that pooping mechanic is for. It's for getting rid of colours that you don't need in transformations. Sneaking about trying to find out what I needed for a certain form really gave me that feeling of being an animal in nature stalking its prey. It sort of hit that return to monkey switch in my brain, and that's when it really clicked for me how special this esoteric game is. That said, I think the devs knew there were certain creatures you were going to need at some point to get that allotted 100 mutations. Because some of the ones you have to catch are unbelievably annoying, like the Rage Blue Beast here that was bringing the anger from earlier back up to me. This one I had to chase at a lower form, which was probably why it was so irritating, and it makes hunting down the legendary dogs in Gen 2 of Pokemon seem like an absolute doddle. And when I finally filled out the 100 mutations, I felt so damn accomplished, but it also allowed me to max out all my stats for the last boss. Which as a person who likes over-leveling in RPGs felt great and gave me another little layer of enjoyment. But once you get that last mutation, you'll instantly zap to the big lady to get your prize. Now I'm going to spoil this game and go through this end section because I have stuff to say about it. But I mean, who the hell is worried about having Cubivore spoiled for them, I guess, but you've been warned. After the big lady conquest, our great big monster son takes over to do a boss rush before we fight the killer Cubivore himself. You have to take on every boss you fought up to this point at the same time, and this was as easy as Bonnie Blue in the end. I saw a lot of people on Reddit saying that they found this bit really hard, but maybe I had an easier time with it because of the grinding I did in my second playthrough. You sort of just have to split them off the pack one at a time until you've wasted all of them. And then it's time to take on the killer Cubivore. And why the hell does he look completely different than he did in the title sequence? Maybe he's been evolving all of this time too, which would make sense because our guy's been at this for literally generations. And this battle is actually really hard, but not for the reasons you might think, it's just sort of long and monotonous. I was getting ready for this epic showdown and this metal riff starts up when you enter the boss arena and I kept thinking, oh yeah, some drums and some bass are going to drop in and this is going to go off. But no, it's just this awful thin guitar riff on its own the whole time. It sounds like your Uncle Nick trying out a new axe at your local guitar centre. I mean, I never mentioned the music in this video so far, but all of it is bizarre and sounds like something Apex Twin or Osamu Sato would have made. It's either this beautiful ambient soundscape or what sounds like your dad after 15 cherries trying to play Our House by Madness on a piano. But I apologise for another digression, I'm sorry, I'm riddled with ADHD. Once I got over how lame our final battle music was, I hit the brick wall that was the 4 relentless gits that are protecting the big bad. Not only are they all tough as nails, they all come at you at once and it is incredibly difficult to get them to split from the pack like you usually do with the big groups in this game. And unlike most of this game, there's absolutely nowhere to heal up. In the rest of the game you'd have grass or an oasis to heal you, but here there's nothing. Which to be fair is to be expected. This is the last level in the game after all, but it turns this last stand into a game of battling the camera that's trying to keep up with the action, while violently mashing the A button with all your might. And then inevitably getting wounded and then trying to get your limb back that they stole to heal up until you win. There isn't much strategy to be had here because it's just pure chaos and there's not much you can do about it. I honestly haven't had my thumbs work this hard since my time playing SmackDown vs Raw with my friends growing up. You would literally break your thumbs trying to make your friend tap out via submissions in that game. And once you're able to clear these cretins, you move on to the final boss himself, and he's just as much of a buzzkill. He isn't even really that difficult, it's just that it takes so long to beat him that it's mentally fatiguing, and fatiguing to my old man hands. And the main reason for him taking so long to beat is that you have to slowly take one piece of him off at a time. This basically makes him into a 6th form final boss that will put any JRPG boss to shame. You just sort of have to slowly chip away at his health and regain whatever limbs you lose until they're dead. It went on for so long that it reminded me of that classic fight scene from They Live that goes on far longer than it should. But this had the effect by the end of making me feel like I had actually physically gone through this battle myself and my thumbs were barely hanging on by the end. Even though the whole battle was a pain, it did have me feeling pretty triumphant as I got the killing blow with my bloody stubs that I used to call fingers. And sadly, that's all there is to Cubivore. I was kinda hoping the ending would be our boy with a harem of big ladies ready to make an army of absolute units to conquer the globe.
I want to make babies with her. Think of them. Great big monsters.
So that is Cubivore Survival of the Fittest, and it is truly a one-of-a-kind game, and it is completely mental. It might be clunky and at times irritating, but it has a heart only a weird little oddity like this is capable of having. Everything feels purposeful and you can feel that Gento thought carefully about every detail he and his team put into this game, which makes it even more of a shame that this will be Saru Brunei's last ever project as a company because they will be dissolved in 2003. For me, that really sucks because I would have loved to have seen what madcap projects they would have cooked up next. We have a dearth of interesting creative ideas in the games industry today, and it's sad that madmen like Gento can't thrive in the industry. He seems to have gone on to be a very successful artist in his own right, but I still mourn what could have been. But at least we have this bizarre game as an everlasting epitaph to his creativity, and it's a game I recommend you experience because there isn't many games like it. I've been a Goblin, and thank you for watching. If you would like to get all my videos early and to get your name in the credits, sign up to my Patreon like all these wonderful people have. Links in the description.